I'm going to introduce Rabbi Elif, who is the education manager of the OU, if that's your proper title. I could be correct me if I was wrong on that. And basically, he was also the one who coordinated this whole series, which was very, very educational and eye-opening for the participants, for the members of the Jacksonville community. So we appreciate what Rabbi Elif has done and arranged for us. And besides for that, we appreciate what the OU does for the Jewish people, because we have many opportunities wherever you are in the United States, but really not only there, but beyond, anywhere in the world. There's so many options of kosher food available through the OU, and I'm sure Rabbi Elif could expand on the widespread of the OU. I know when during the recent peace talks between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, there was the OU was supervising the Kashrus on the Israeli delegation there. So and they're now expanding in these new Middle Eastern and North African countries. So besides for being very present in the U.S., they actually have a presence worldwide. And now it's our honor and privilege to hear Rabbi Elif share about what goes on in the OU and in the world of Kashrus in general. So thank you, Rabbi Elif. I will now make you the host so you could share your screen if you need that.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi Cohn, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be back in Jacksonville in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, the last time I was there, it was physically in person. Now you have to deal with my virtual appearance. So thank you, Rabbi Cohn, and Rabbi Rabinowitz, for arranging today's presentation. For those that have been around the Jacksonville area and can remember, my presentation was about 4 or 5 years ago when I was there. Some of the stuff will be new, some of the stuff you would have been exposed to already. So I guess Chazar never hurts. But I'm going to go through some of the basics over here. I'm just going to share my screen. Also, just to mention one other thing, Rabbi Cohn mentioned about the United Arab Emirates. For those that are interested, on Sunday, February 21st at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, we're having a free webinar discussing travel to these new frontiers, such as the Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. We're going to actually hear from some of my colleagues that run the Middle Eastern desk and the Morocco desk at the OU, and are actually there right now. They'll be discussing what it takes to give certification and what a person could look for if they're going there on travel for kosher, and that's actually been done in conjunction with dansdeals.com. So Dan himself will be giving some travel tips as well. So if you want, I can give you that information, and it should be an interesting afternoon as well. So I'm going to share my screen over here, and can everybody see it? I can't hear you, Rabbi Cohn.
I muted myself, but yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go a little bit about Kashrus 101 over here, and that is, I'd like to break Kashrus and discussing what goes on with certification into 3 components. We're going to discuss a little bit about the background of kosher, a little bit about what kosher production is and requires, then other common issues that comes up. What's the story with this? Why can't I? Why can't I? And feel free to jump with any question you might have. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, like, from a halachic perspective and a hashkafic perspective, for both Jewish law and Jewish, thought. What's the story with kosher? And if you take a look at Hilchos Kashrus, there's quite a lot of different parts of Shulchan Aruch and even Gemara that discuss the laws that pertain to food. You go through half of Yardea discusses the laws of food. If you take a look at even Even Elazar, what talks about women's issues, it talks about the food that's required to be provided, or at a chasana, at a wedding. You have in Orach Chaim, we have all the food that's mentioned over there as well, because we have every yontif that you have has food. And when it's not a yontif, let's say, for example, a fast day, we talk about the lack of food. As a matter of fact, there's all of Chelik Hey of Mishnah Berurah discussed over there, just halachas the Pesach, which obviously deals with either matzah or not having chametz. So clearly, food plays a very large role in Judaism. As a matter of fact, we have a picture over here. This is pre-COVID, at the Tasher Rebbe's Paris Tish. And whenever Hasidim get together, whether there's COVID or there isn't COVID, there's always food involved. They sit around the Rebbe's Tish, and from a perspective, they take the food, the mundane, and turn it into the metaphysical. But it's not like the food doesn't stop over there. Every life cycle event that we have as Jews is defined by the food, whether it's at the Shalom Zachar of a newborn baby boy or Kiddush of a newborn baby girl, to a bris milah, to a bar bat mitzvah, to a wedding, even to the Sudas Havra, to the meal that's had after the burial of a close relative. Food permeates everything we do. And as a matter of fact, if I can jog your memory, if I may, to about a year ago, before anyone was aware of something called COVID, what happened in Shul? Everybody came. The parking lot filled out at the Eitz Chaim, and everyone came in time, hopefully for the rabbi's sermon, followed by Kiddush and maybe lunch. And every good self-respecting Shul has this Kiddush as well. So the question is, why? Why is Judaism so obsessed with food? So I will put out there anyone that's on Zoom, if they want to unmute themselves and give us a thought of someone that's, in the Kol-based medrash. Can anybody tell me why we're so obsessed with food? No one? Okay. Very interactive crowd today. Okay, so.
Okay, I have an answer.
Okay, go ahead.
It sustains life.
It sustains life. Okay, that's a good answer. You're on the right track. Anyone else want to take a stab? Okay, so I'm going to jog everybody's memory even before COVID. We have to go back a little further in time to beginning of time, creation, Bereshis. When I give this presentation to school sometimes, and elementary school especially, and I'll say, okay, who remembers that? Undoubtedly, we're going to have half the kids will raise their hand. So I'm not sure how many people in Jacksonville were around the beginning of time, but if we take a look at the beginning of time in Bereshis, what happened? What was the first thing that basically happened? Is that Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, were given one mitzvah and one mitzvah alone, and that mitzvah was not to eat from the Eitz HaChaim, not from the Eitz HaDas, as they were supposed to be. Not eat from the Eitz HaChaim, and from that they would eat from the Eitz HaDas. So now, what?
Yeah, we do. We blow it.
Correct. Someone just had a chat. I'm just not showing it over here. Okay. So basically, they lost their opportunity. They blew it, as you so rightly said, and now forever until the end of time, we are stuck having to rectify that original sin of Adam and Eve of eating. So Tzadok HaKohen Lublin, one of the great Hasidic thought masters of the late 19th century, discusses this, and he says everything that we do today in this world is to rectify that chet, is to fix that sin, is that tikkun olam, is to be able to be mashim, to complete the world. And what's that? The problem is that the first sin came through food, and therefore the way to fix the world comes through food. So it's not a coincidence that food plays such a large role in Judaism. That is actually the way that we can go ahead about bringing the world, making the world a better place, and bringing Mashiach Tzidkenu, hopefully, amen. So that's just a little bit of background. It's important to keep that in mind, because otherwise, if we don't have that perspective, we kind of don't understand the implications for why we're so obsessed with kosher. So let's take a look at a little bit about the building blocks of kosher. We'll discuss some of the ingredients, the methods and processes, the verification, and the like. So I'd like to break down kosher production. And I know both Rabbi Schreier and Rabbi Rabinowitz touched on this a little bit as well. And they discussed some of the components of making kosher. But I'd like to simplify and put into three basic building blocks. The first building block of kosher production would be the ingredients. And we'll discuss a little bit more in a few minutes, but that basically means that all ingredients used in kosher food production needs to either be kosher certified or something that comes from an inherently kosher source. Once the ingredients all check out, then we need to check the methods and processes. Is anything else being manufactured in this facility? What else is going on in this restaurant? Is there kosher or non-kosher? Is there parve and dairy? Is there meat and dairy? And then finally, once that all checks out, we need to make sure that the final products are registered and we keep track of that. I know Rabbi Fish does a wonderful job of managing the choice kosher options in Jacksonville, so it's a little bit easier to keep track of the handful of options over there. Still have the pickle guy down there? Whatever happened with him?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Still there? Okay, and the restaurant still in business?
We got two. We got two
Okay, that's
restaurants
great.
now. Yes.
Especially
We
with
have,
COVID. Those
Yes, and we have Rabbi Shochet here also as well, who's being does the supervision of the facilities. So have really the Kashrus leaders of Jacksonville are all here in the room. So we're honored to have them here.
So in your situation, it's very easy to find something certified. You can call Rabbi Shochet, you can call Rabbi Fish and say, I saw this pickle guy, is it really certified by you? And the answer is yes or no. They all use a little of a larger operation. We currently certify over 1 million products produced in 10,000 plants in 108 countries globally. Nobody can keep all that information in their head. I don't care how much of a genius you might be. So therefore, it's important that every product and every restaurant and every facility that we certify has to be in our databases with the proper information. And as someone who also oversees, one of my roles is also oversee our consumer hotline, our email service, our apps, and the like. We get on average about 150 calls plus another 50 emails a day of consumers that are trying to find out and verify if these products are certified. And if we don't have a record of that final product, we haven't vetted the labels, there's no way for us to go ahead and now vouch for the authenticity of the kashrus of that product. So I tell it to all the manufacturers that I meet with, it's imperative that they make sure that every product, even if their facility is all kosher, each product needs to be certified so that we can go ahead and verify to the consumer that is indeed certified. And it goes even beyond that. In our offices here in New York, which I know exist in the virtual domain, but hopefully sometime soon we'll be back in the physical realm. We do a label review of every product that is applied for to be certified. We're going to check the label not only to make sure that it's certified, but does it have the right labeling on it. There are times when they'll put a dairy on something which is parv, or they'll put parv on a dairy, and we don't want that to happen. We want to try to nip that in the bud so we don't have to have any type of alerts that go out later to tell you that the following product went out with an unauthorized OU or with the wrong type of labeling on it. So the products is also important for the kosher certification process. So let's talk about ingredients for a little bit. Some ingredients you may be familiar with, other ingredients might look foreign to you. I imagine Rabbi Fish and Rabbi Shochet have seen most of the stuff that's on the screen here, but for those that are uninitiated, you have very simple products that are processed. For example, you have the Heinz tomato ketchup on the top left corner. But then when you go into manufacturing facility, if you go clockwise around now to the top right corner, you have this is a picture of pallets and stacks in a large warehouse. That doesn't look like the things you're going to find in your supermarket, and may require a little additional sleuthing to find the kosher symbols on it or to ascertain that that ingredient is actually kosher. Even bulk liquids might come either in tankers, or we have on the bottom screen here, we have totes, where a lot of times glycerins, oils, sugars, and the like will come in these totes. Not only do we have to make sure that it has the proper labeling on it, because a lot of these times the totes are reused, but we may actually have issues with the kashrus of the totes as well. For example, if a glycerin is kept or non-kosher oil is kept in those totes for more than 24 hours, we have the principle of kavush, which means that something is now basically pickled or absorbed into the walls of the vessel. In this case, you'll have, let's say, a non-kosher oil is in there. Now, if you put a kosher, it's cleaned out, and without having it being kosher, you put a kosher oil in there and send it out, and it's there for more than 24 hours. That could now impact the kosher status of the oils that are in there. So it's important to make sure that the totes are dedicated towards that particular product, and if they're not, to make sure that they indeed were kosher in between. And if not, I can have a discussion with Fish or Shochet about ways to work around it as well, but that's something to keep in mind as well. The same thing exists with tanker trailers as well. They're bringing large trailers up to some factories. I'll just go back over here. We actually have an OU certified trailer in the picture that we have over here. And in that situation, we need to be able to make sure that that trailer is also kosher certified, or is in a kosher status, or has had kosher washes or upgrade washes, which are all standard for the industry. And then we also have regular ingredients such as fresh vegetables and milk, and all of those might have unique requirements depending where you live. For example, in New York City, you'd have to filter the water, but no place else in the United States. The vegetables should be acceptable. There may be problems of tolaim, of insect infestation, depending on if you're using certain leafy greens. You also may run into issues now with the global economy that we have. They might bring in produce from Israel. Now you have to make sure that that produce has the proper trumas and meisters, the proper tithing taken off of that as well. When we take a look at the equipment, again, some of the equipment might be standard, but again, some of it might not be. You have something like your top, regular stove and oven on the top left corner, but then as they go around the screen here, you have other types of second. No, I just saw this chat right now. Thank you, Shirley, for telling us it's not one Rebbe. I'm pretty sure it's a Tash Rebbe, but okay, I'll take your word on that. Just want to see over here. Give me a second. Okay, can you see my mouse? Is that appearing on the screen? It's not appearing on the screen.
Yes, yeah, you got it.
Is it there? Is there a mouse on the screen, or you can't see?
Yeah, yes, it is. We see it.
Okay, perfect. So we have over here, we have what's known as a steam jacketed kettle. In order to cook liquid products, in this situation, there's steam that goes inside the walls of this. It heats up the inside and product is cooked inside. So obviously, if you have kosher, non-kosher in the kettle, it would have to be kosher. But even if you're using it, let's say it's dedicated for kosher or dedicated for milchiks or parv, the water that's inside this is then circulated around the rest of the facility. And even if there's another line that's not kosher or has a different status, it might be, let's say this is milchik, something else is parv, that water that's circulating in the jackets of these kettles could impact the kosher status of what's inside as well. So we need to make sure that we've taken care of that as well. Additionally, we have cases like pasteurizers over here, where there's water that circulates on the other side to either cool or heat product. That would have to be kosher. Sometimes we're doing milchiks and parv on a lot of these lines. They have to drop the water in order for it to be parv, because it gets impacted by the milk that was on the other side, makes it dairy. You have other items like this, such as tunnel ovens, where a baked good is placed on one side of the conveyor, comes out. These can actually be very complicated to kosher, because it would require taking off all the conveyor belts, blow torching them, and getting inside the oven again to all the nook and crannies to blow torch whatever's inside there. We don't recommend most companies do that. We recommend that they stay in whatever status they are, let's say just as parv or dairy, but it can be done, but it requires a mashgiach that has the knowledge and skill set to do that. And then we also have other types of equipment such as this, which is a frying machine, where such as bagels or donuts are dumped into here, sent along here in this big vat of oil with fans underneath, which then push the item out while it gets fried. A lot of these, again, there's kashrus concerns such as what was in there beforehand. Has the oil been changed? Again, also, if it's used for non-kosher or for dairy and then for parv, all these have to be kosher and taken care of. And what type of oil is being used in there as well. So there's all sorts of equipment that the average layman might not be familiar with. And it's important to keep in mind that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes of your local facility. Not only that, but I mentioned before that we have to check what else is in line. This is schematics of a plant that lists the regen, heaters, coolers, various parts of the heating system that will then go to other types of goes to homogenizers, holding tubes, goes to other types of kettles and storage tanks, which we'd have to follow the schematics, be able to read the schematics to know what goes where, what can be rerouted, in order to make sure that there's nothing that can compromise the kashrus integrity of that line. And then also it's important that the mashgiach, that you have the mashgichim there to know what to do with the koshering. Sometimes you have teams of mashgichim that will be there to kosher. There are times when the system is set up that basically they have a what's known as a CIP cleaning in place, or standard sanitation protocols, and that might be enough to kosher as well. So it depends on how it's being run, and you might not need a mashgiach there. Or the times that there's a lot of physical labor involved, such as this picture over here of the White House kitchen. This is taken actually during the Obama administration, during one of the Hanukkah parties, where they went ahead, and that's actually Rabbi Shem Tov, I believe, was the head of Chabad in Washington, D.C., and they went ahead and koshered the White House's kitchen for that event. So don't think it's just your own houses that get koshered for Pesach, or factories or restaurants. The White House has done it on numerous times as well. But each time requires that you have to know exactly what the situation is and how to run that koshering. And then it requires that our mashgichim need to be involved to be able to point out to the facility and staff members at those plants what needs to be done. The mashgichim themselves have to be worthwhile, have to be knowledgeable, have to know exactly what's going on, know when to ask questions, when to make decisions. They all use a vast network where no one operates in a vacuum. Mashgichim down in the field have us in the office call, and then even us, there's a pilpul chaverim, we'll be speaking to other heads of different departments, as well as our poskim and our technical services people to be able to figure out what exactly needs to be done in every situation. And I would even point out over here that it can't be done without the trust and the cooperation of whoever is our certified client. As Rabbi Fisher, Rabbi Shochet can tell you that if the balabas, if the owner of the facility is not willing to work with you or is looking to get around, it's impossible to certify. So the only way they can have good kosher certification is with a willing and able partner of whoever is the manager or owner of the facility that you certify. So that's a little bit of the background in terms of what it actually takes to manufacture that kosher product. And let's go into some questions. I know a few other people had many questions that were sent in advance. So let's take a look at some questions and what might come up over here. So this is a question for the audience over here. Is anybody familiar with these two products up on the screen?
Yes.
Get it right.
Good. What's the difference between these two bottles?
The left one is certified and the right one isn't.
And how do you know that?
See the symbol?
Okay. You see the symbol. So that's a good answer. But why does one have the symbol and one doesn't have the symbol?
I mean, one has protein, so probably more problematic.
Okay. I mean, there are
Different,
kosher
I guess.
proteins out there.
Different flavors.
Different
Yeah.
flavors. Okay.
Coloring. Okay.
So I'm hearing great answers
Ah.
over here. We'll just quickly go through the ingredient panel over here. If you take a look.
Yeah. Hi.
Here's the ingredients that are on the one that's not certified. We have water, so there's no problem with that. Hydrolyzed whey protein, which is milk. Whey is the derivative of the cheese making process. So if the cheese making process is certified, you have kosher whey that's drained off of it. But if it's not certified, you conceivably have Gvinas Akum over here, and it's not kosher whey. So at best, we're dealing with kosher whey. At worst, we're dealing with non-kosher. We have sucrose, which is the chemical name. What?
Artificial sweeteners.
1 second, we're going to get to in a second. We're sucrose, which is actually not artificial sweetener. Sucrose is the chemical name for sugar. And then we have a hydrolyzed collagen. Anybody familiar with hydrolyzed collagen?
Collagen is from animals.
Okay, collagen is actually from all living beings. Your skin has collagen in it. For those that are into the beauty industry, they sell collagen injections, which supposedly gives your skin a nice sheen and gives it more elasticity. Collagen is the enzyme inside skin and meat that gives it its elasticity. So in this case, hydrolyzed collagen is collagen that's been turned into powder. At best, it's coming from a kosher shechted animal, slaughtered animal. Highly unlikely though, because there isn't a lot of that available on the market. Most likely it's coming from a non-kosher animal or non-kosher, non-shechted animal. So now we've got a meat product in here, we've got a milk product, and not only do we don't have to worry about the flavors because we have right off the bat over here, we have basar b'challah with nothing to talk about. So something to think about for those of you who ever want to know, there is a basar b'challah of Gatorade out there, which is one of the things that I caution consumers, especially in the major metropolitan areas, major Jewish metropolitan areas. They're used to walking into the supermarket and basically pulling anything off the shelf. They really need to be careful to make sure that even if they're familiar with the brand, even if it looks similar, make sure it has that hashgacha, because oftentimes there are reasons why it might not, and you need to check each and every package that you purchase for that hashgacha on the label. Another question we get a lot of times is, what's the story with frozen yogurt or ice cream stores? They see this big sign in the window. Well, let's back up a second over here. Is there a kosher certified frozen yogurt store or ice cream store in Jacksonville these days?
No. Yeah. Brewster's. Yes. Brewster's.
Okay. So as Rabbi Shochet can attest, a frozen yogurt or ice cream store is actually one of the easiest places to certify. They basically take open a package, they dump it that has hachshir on it, they dump it in a machine, or they have containers of ice cream that are over there, and they're going to scoop it out of those ice creams. And they may have some sprinkles and some chocolate chips. And again, they're going to open up a package and put in there. There's really, everything's cold, nothing's being processed for the most part. So it's one of the easiest things to give us hashgacha, especially if you have a mashgiach who's being Yosef and Nichlas, who's coming in and out on a periodic basis. Now, it's also one of the easiest things to have treif, because if you have no mashgiach there, if there's no Yosef and Nichlas, if there's no one checking up on there, then you have absolutely no idea what's inside that machine. A lot of times you have these frozen yogurt places and they have a big sign in the window and it says, "We are OU certified." Chances are they're not, because there are, as far as I know, there are no frozen yogurt ice cream places that this store itself is OU certified. Or you'll walk in and the manager will hand you this big binder that's like 300 pages with all sorts of certificates, which looks wonderful. But at the end of the day, you have no way of verifying that that certificate corresponds to what's inside that machine. So unless someone's there to see what they're putting in the machine, unless someone's there to see what they're putting into the sprinkle bin, there's no way to assume that it's kosher without having hashgacha on the facility. So again, it's one of the easiest things to certify. It's also one of the easiest things to be not certified. So just be careful if you ever see one of those signs out there, they hand you one of those binders. Another common question that comes up is people want to know what's the story with their favorite Coca-Cola products. Is anybody familiar with the machine all the way on the left here?
Yeah. Sure. It's called like a freestyle, right?
Very good. So it's a Coca-Cola freestyle machine. It's become very popular in a lot of convenience stores and gas stations, even restaurants, where you have the option of blending together over 100 different flavors of Coca-Cola products. That's one of the ways that Coca-Cola is actually pushing this because it gives consumers choice, and they also have greater control of that, which we'll discuss in a minute. Then we have the Coca-Cola or the regular soda fountain dispensers, where you have a tube that's connected to a bag and box either underneath the machine or in a back room, where the syrup comes out and is mixed together with water and carbon dioxide to give it those fizz and bubbles. We also have Slurpees, which will come out. They're frozen. Again, it's basically similar to the from the fountain machine. It's going to be connected to a box with a bag inside of it with the syrup, and water is added, and now it's frozen and then slushed around. We then dispense it. So what could be the problem with these? So I'll do the easiest one first. The Coca-Cola freestyle machines that we have over here there is no problem with it. It is a proprietary machine owned by the Coca-Cola company, and the cartridges that are used to change the flavors out are not compatible with any other type of cartridges and can only be purchased from the Coca-Cola company. And every single flavor that is used in those is certified. So the next time you see a Coca-Cola freestyle machine, you can enjoy whatever combination you want. Bate avon, there's no issues with that.
Oh.
What's the question?
Yeah, no, it's great because I have avoided it in the past, and I was like in like a big amusement parks in Orlando. They're all over the place, and they're like, okay, so I could take like basic Coke as something like wouldn't be concerned about, but they have all these amazing flavors. So I'm very happy to know that these are kosher.
Yeah. So that's easy enough. Then we have the fountain sodas, which are easier, but again, you need to verify that what's being used in the machine is actually what they say it is. Just because there's a little placard in the front that says Coca-Cola Cherry or Diet Coke, that's not necessarily what's in there. Because a lot of times, especially when you have a freelance vendor, they look to get save as much money. And if they don't have to pay Coca-Cola their franchise fee or pay for their syrups, they'll get it from some off-brand and might not be kosher. So therefore, we recommend, if it's at all possible, to check. A lot of times it's right underneath the machine or the back room. Just go take a look and see what's going on. Some of the larger chains, there's more police work that goes because Coca-Cola obviously doesn't want their brand tarnished and people using other things, but we recommend that you check. And the same thing with the Slurpees, to check the back room or this back, wherever this bag and boxes is, to make sure that indeed what they're using is what they're claiming it is, because there are times where they'll use off brands or things which aren't certified.
Right. So just to clarify on the middle on the fountain sodas. So
Yeah.
what I've noticed in some convenience store that I checked out, so unless correct me if I'm wrong, they sometimes have the Coca-Cola brand. It has like the Coca-Cola brand on the bag, but it doesn't have a OU symbol on the bag. Is that something possible? And would that be okay?
So the OU symbol will not be on it as long as it says Coca-Cola or Fanta or Sprite. That is sufficient. The Coca-Cola syrups will not come with an OU on the actual labels of those bag and boxes.
Right. So that's what I've noticed, and thank you for clarifying that.
So as long as if it's a Coca-Cola product in North America, it will be certified. There's one exception, which I believe is a Slurpee. I think it's the Fanta Pina Colada. I have to double check, which is actually dairy. But besides those, everything else is part. So as long as you can tell it's come from Coca-Cola, it says Coca-Cola Company on it, and Fanta or Sprite, then that's fine.
Does this apply to IC brand? So that's right. So if it's Coca.
Coca-Cola made for icy.
Right.
IC would be the same thing. The Slurpee is a little bit better because it's the 7-Up, it's the 7-Eleven brand, and there is a certain police force that goes around 7-Elevens making sure they're using the proper products, and Coca-Cola has specific contracts with them. IC is more of an off-brand, and again, but it'd be the same thing. If you can verify the machine that's using the Coca-Cola syrup, the Sprite or Fanta syrup, then the IC would be acceptable as well.
Right. Is the same applied to Pepsi products?
I can't speak for Pepsi products because they're not OU certified.
Okay.
Offline when we're not recording, I can have a discussion with Fish Rabbi Shochet about those products. But in this capacity, I can only verify that all the Coca-Cola products in North America are certified.
Are there other products out there that could be certified and we wouldn't know? Like that type of thing, like in huge quantities, they're already
There are.
mixed?
There are. It really depends on which one. Again, your Rabbanim in town can kind of, guide you. Rabbi Cohen at the Kol, Rabbi Fish, Rabbi Shochet can guide you in terms of what would not be acceptable. There are times also that a lot of communities, there's no official certification on a store, but there might be, let's say, local 7-Eleven, where someone locally checks out periodically in an unofficial capacity the back room, and they, spot check and basically verify for the community that the Slurpees or the fountain sodas are acceptable. Which is here I live in Kew Gardens Hills, Queens, and we have a 7-Eleven right along Main Street over here, and the local VOD as a service for the Kuhila does go back and unofficially checks to make sure that they're using the certified products so that everyone can enjoy the Slurpees and the fountain sodas in the front. Another common question we get is everyone's favorite is what's the story with coffee, either at your local 7-Eleven, Dunkin' Donuts, or Starbucks. So let's talk about plain unflavored coffee for a minute now. And I'm not really concerned about the names that it might have, if they're called a Venti or a Grande or an Americano or an Italiano, or it's a breakfast blend, nighttime delight, or, jet fuel. Those are all just various names of coffees, or even espresso versus cappuccino. The cappuccino is a little bit more complicated because it has things added to it. But as long as it's a plain unflavored coffee, no matter how potent it might be, that in theory would be acceptable from any source. However, things have changed at Starbucks, and Starbucks has evolved. And what used to be also acceptable at any Starbucks has changed, because Starbucks now uses special proprietary dishwashers where they wash the coffee making equipment with the apparatus that they use to manufacture meat sandwiches and the like as well. And therefore, there is a concern of cross-contamination and blia of Isser, of absorbing Isser from the non-kosher into the coffee making machines. And therefore, our official policy at the OU is that we do not recommend coffee from a Starbucks unless it's a kiosk. The kiosk would be one of those that you might find on the Florida Turnpike or at an airport, where they're not making any type of sandwiches, it's just prepared pastries and coffees. In that situation, the coffee would be acceptable from that Starbucks. But if it's from a full service Starbucks store where they have these meat sandwiches and other dishes, then that would be problematic and we don't recommend it. But from other places that they don't have this type of proprietary dishwasher, the plain unflavored coffee would be acceptable. If you order anything with flavor, you'd have to make sure that the flavoring does have a hashgacha on it before they put it in. Then milk and sugar, unless you're makman chol Yisrael, would be inherently acceptable from any source. So if you're using a soy milk or an oat milk, again, make sure that that has hashgacha on it as well. Any questions about the coffees?
How about Bishalako on coffee?
There is no problem with Bishul Akum on coffee. We actually have several truths about that in our office, and Ramesh has a truth about it as well. Basically, coffee is inherently water with a little bit of flavoring in it, and the concept of Bishul Akum does not apply to water. It would actually be the same thing. I don't know if everybody was discussed the last week, but that's one of the stars also for whiskey, which is distilled and then cooked, or beer. Why would that not be subject to the Bishul Akum? And again, because they're inherently a water, there's no problem with Bishul Akum in that situation.
Just one more question about coffees. You mentioned there's a different dishwashing process in Starbucks. What is the dishwashing process that applies to planes?
So I haven't done the full research into it. With Belsky Zatztal, who was the posek at the OU, used to always be makbid on not getting the coffee from that are made on the planes. He didn't like that. He would just ask for a cup of hot water, and he'd bring his own instant coffee on the planes. Lahalacha, many places hold it's not a problem, because again, it's, in theory, it's a coffee maker and a coffee pot, but there is a chashash in some of the situations of what they do. Right now, it's not a problem, because if you fly, they're not serving you coffee. If you're lucky, they'll bring out one of those little goodie bags with water and pretzels in it. But anticipating the day when we can have some sense of normalcy again. it's machlikas apaiskim whether or not the ones on the airplane would be an issue.
Okay. Shkoyach.
Another question that comes up frequently are jumbo juices. I don't know if those are popular in Jacksonville or not, but they're very popular up in New York, and they're a chain of juice bars. You go in, and basically they make you a fruit smoothie. You choose your strawberries, your bananas, your grapes, your oranges, and things like that. And the question is, are they acceptable? So inherently, fruit should be okay. The problem is that a lot of these fruit places without hashgacha are using heavily infested fruits such as strawberries or raspberries or blackberries, which are very problematic to use from a kashrus perspective. Additionally, a lot of times they use grape juice as a base. So without hashgacha, and that's obviously has a lot of kashrus concerns. So without having hashgacha there, you don't know what's going on, and we don't recommend getting juices from one of these fresh juice places. Again, if your local VAD is able to go ahead and certify it, that takes away a lot of the issues, but there are those concerns as well.
Could I ask, let's say if I ask only for orange juice, so squeeze me oranges.
Again, if you can see that they're squeezing, that the squeezer is clean, and you see them squeezing in front of you, then that would be acceptable. A lot of times now what they have is that they squeeze it, but not in front of you. They make lots of batches in the beginning of the day because it takes too long. And you'd have to just make sure that, that's really oranges they're putting there. Because a lot of times what they do with orange juice these days is your Tropicana, for example, it's Tropicana not a certified product, but other orange juices that you find in the store have actually all sorts of additives added to them because people don't like the fresh orange juice flavor. It's too bitter. So they add some bitter blockers to the orange juice. They add some other additional flavoring to give it a more wholesome orange taste to it and mouth feel. So you'd have to make sure that it's just pure oranges, nothing else is added to that as well. Yes, in today's day and age, nothing is what it seems and nothing is simple. So a lot of times, people have questions. We have a consumer hotline, which has a full-time rabbi that's here to answer your questions and can respond to questions about OU products, policies, and PSAC. A number, if you ever have questions, you can reach us at 212-613-8241. That goes to our hotline. We also have email service, which is kosherq@ou.org, which I don't have over here. We can email us. Again, it's kosherq as in question ou.org. And we also have social media presence on both Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And our handle is @OUKosher. So there's many ways you can reach out to us. And feel free if you have questions, you see something that you're not sure about in the facility, give us a call, and we'll be glad to answer your questions with regards to those products as well. That's the end of my basic presentation, a little bit about some of the major questions that come up for consumers as well, what it takes to certify a product as kosher. I would be glad now, I think we have a couple more minutes, so I'm sure some people have other questions as well. So feel free to ask those questions.
I want to go back, but the Gatorade, the two products, what you say, one is kosher, one is not. I understand if you look in the bottle, but but the production facility, how are you making sure that they have a machine for each separate flavor, what they're doing, or they use the same one and might be contaminated between the two products?
So in that situation, let's go back for a second over here. We've got so we got the lines over here. That's what the mashgiach will do. Over here, this is a bottling line. And one of the jobs of the mashgiach is to check to see what else is on the bottling line and to make sure that there's nothing that's going to impact its status. It means if we're in a dairy and they're running something par, we have to make sure that's kosher between dairy. If there's something non-kosher, like the Gatorade, then we have to make sure that it's kosher between the non-kosher and kosher run. Additionally, a lot of times there might not even be manufactured in that facility. They might manufacture based upon volume in another facility, which is not certified at all. But that is one of the things that we look at when we certify a factory is what else is going on, what other products are there, and what type of protocol do we need between kosher and non-kosher, parv and dairy.
So they have a full-time mashgiach in the Gatorade, let's say?
No, they don't. No, we don't have full-time mashgiach. Again, it's going to be Yosef and Nechnas. But what we can do is we're able to audit their production records, and we can see exactly when they did things. A lot of times, like a Gatorade facility, koshering is built into electronically programmed into their sanitation protocols, and it'll automatically kosher in between the various types of products. Again, a lot of companies will also do some type of sanitation between because they don't want one Gatorade product tasting like another. You don't want your blue Arctic Blast tasting like raspberry cherry. So they'll make sure that there's a full sanitation on the line anyhow, so that you don't have any issues of flavor as well. But yes, the mashgiach will go ahead and his job will be to check those production records as well. And there's various ways to do it, both electronically. There's things called Taylor charts, which are legally required to be on anything that generates heat in a food production facility that records the heat and the date and the time, and they legally have to keep that for the USDA and the FDA and the local health department. And we can go into the facility, pull that off, and see exactly what they ran and when and at what temperature.
So if there's always a cleaning in between every single run, what does it mean that there's dairy equipment?
So the cleaning is not a halachic koshering, and therefore something, let's say dairy equipment, means that they might have cleaned it, but they have not done it in a way that it's koshered it. So if it's not been koshered, the equipment that's being produced on still has a halacha. It's considered dairy, and therefore anything that's produced on it would be dairy equipment. If they kosher it, then that would now change the product to parv.
So what would be the difference, for example? Meaning, if let's say, for example, they cleaned it with, I don't know, we have like soap here. I'm sure they use something different in factories. But if you would have cleaned it with soap in between, so at least according to the Shulchan Aruch, now that everything is pogame, so what would be dairy about it?
So according to Shulchan Aruch, it's not necessarily a machlek, it's a place actually if detergents are pogame something. But even if it is pogame, that's not going to be enough to kosher things. That would only help in terms of if it's ben yomo, if it hasn't been used in the last if it's been used in the last 24 hours, if it's ben yomo rather, used in the last 24 hours. If it has been used, then pogame will help to get rid of the 24-hour requirement. But then you still have to do a koshering. You can never change from dairy to parv without doing a full koshering.
Regarding the black coffee, how do we know that they didn't use the same equipment for dairy beverages?
In terms of coffee, you don't know for sure, but for the most part, most coffees are never made with milk in it. They're always added afterwards, and therefore the pot that holds the coffee in it or the coffee brewer doesn't have anything else in it. It would be very rare to find that they actually added milk to the situation. Now, if you go into one of these, convenience stores that has like an automatic filling machine where you can have coffee and hot cocoa and things like that, that's but if it's just coming from a 7-Eleven where they just have these big buckets of thermoses of coffee, or other places where it's coming out of a coffee making machine and the like, that's less of an issue.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Why sometimes it says OUD even though there's no dairy product in the that's because of dairy equipment.
So there's actually two parts to that. One is because of dairy equipment, where if the line hasn't been kosher, we can't halachically consider it to be parv. The other point is that there are additives that are not deemed dairy by Congress, but are halachically dairy. There's a very powerful dairy lobby out there, the Dairy Board, that constantly lobbies Congress to pass laws to defining what is dairy. Some of those things that are not considered dairy are like caseinates, which are a milk derivative, also known as casein, sodium caseinate, things like that. The caseinates are viewed by Congress as non-dairy. The reason for that is because the dairy allergens do not exist in there. However, since it's derived directly from milk, from a halach perspective, it's 100% dairy. But that's why you'll find a lot of non-dairy creamers that are out there saying non-dairy OUD on it, but then it says a non-dairy creamer because they're using these caseinates and other derivatives in there, which are actually halachically dairy, but legally are not dairy. Another issue that comes up is a lot of times products will say that natural and or artificial flavors. Flavors go through a process that also remove their allergens, so there's no dairy allergen problem, but a lot of times dairy can be used in those flavors. They are not legally required to be disclosed, and since the flavor is being used to give as a flavor, that's something which is avidah l'taima. Since it's avidah l'taima, gives off flavor, it's not bottle, and therefore even in a minute amount, it would impact the dairy status of that product.
Okay, can I ask a question about Pesach is around the corner?
Sure.
2 months from now. And I heard that all your policy is every Pesach product has a full-time shgiach. Let me know if I'm correct. If yes, my question is the dairy product of Pesach, OUD for Pesach, could we assume that it's Chalav Yisrael because they have told all-time shgiach?
So the answer to your question is it depends. There are certain products that are on their base level always kosher Pesach, and they will not have the mashgiach tamidi, such as bottled water and things like that, and salt. Those won't have a mashgiach tamidi on them, even though it's say OUP. Anything more complicated than that will have a mashgiach tamidi on that. So therefore, a lot of people that are makban on Bishra Yisrael, for example, will buy the OUP tuna fish. A lot of times the supermarkets have their own private label brand of tuna fish, and they sell Pesach time as OUP, and people go to the store to dafka buy that tuna fish because they know that it's Bishra Yisrael, because since OUP it has hashgacha tamidus on it. However, if it's a dairy product, it is kosher Pesach, it is not Chalav Yisrael. There's not enough Chalav Yisrael milk in the United States to go around to meet the requirements and supply chains of all these facilities out there that are running dairy products. So just because it does have hashgacha tamidus, but no, it's not Chalav Yisrael unless it says specifically on the label that it's Chalav Yisrael.
Okay, Shkayach, thank you again, Rabbi Ella, for this very, very informative presentation. And thank you everyone else for joining us. Thank you not only for today's presentation, but for the entire series and for everything else the OU does for the kosher consumer worldwide. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for that. Shkayach.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
very
Rabbi
much,
Fish,
Shkoyach.
Rabbi Fish, I presume I'll be getting a call from you one of these days about something or other.
Thank you.
My pleasure.